Lots brewing, of course, in this market. As you know, I want to get to the big topic. Well, there's a bunch of big topics, of course, including Auston Matthews. But Willie Nylander, what's the latest on that front?
Seems to have cooled a little bit after, it spiked up a bit this week. I mean, the truth of the matter here is the Leafs and William Nylander's agent have been talking all season long. I think it's been a sort of a long grind of a negotiation. And that dialogue will continue, but they're getting closer and closer to where I think that both sides recognize it'd be nice to get a deal done, get it put to bed and out of the way long before the trade deadline, perhaps even before the All-Star weekend comes to Toronto at the start of February. But the fact remains that they haven't quite got to the point where both sides are comfortable with the deal. It seems as though they're well aligned on an 8-year contract. I think that there's an understanding between both. It's going to be above $11 million if they get it done, and then it's a matter of getting to the exact number. And that's a tricky thing to do with the cap going up. It's not something we've had for a number of seasons here in the league, so there's been less focus on it. But when the top players are now looking at the percentage of what they get from the team in terms of the salary cap, and that hasn't mattered when the cap number itself isn't going up, but with a $4 million jump coming next season, I think that the Leafs are naturally making comparables to players, what they've signed already in the past. And if you're in William Nylander's camp, you're saying, yeah, but 13% of the cap at $87 million, that's well, it's closer to $11.5 million. And so, I'm not sure exactly where they're going to wind up when it comes to the number, but it does seem like talks are in a good place. And I do think there's going to be a push to get it done in the near future.
Yeah, Chris, obviously I think the same thing. And he obviously bet on himself here too, right? He's played great and he's held out now. My take is if they get this deal done, does that solidify we're running with this core four again here, trying to move forward and just, run it back here with these guys? Or is there still a chance that somebody gets moved to, solidify maybe a deeper net or back end?
I think it would solidify the core four. I mean, obviously Mitch Marner's only 1 year out from having the same conversation about him next season. And so, he's going to have a decision to make too. I'm not sure where that will go. But, you would think the Leafs will try to keep him. I'd imagine being a local guy who's had the success he's had here, that, there's a deal to be made with him. And so, at that point, obviously John Tavares too is out of a contract as of next season. I mean, time flies. And so, there's still room, I guess, is what I'm saying, because there's still decisions to be made to make a change to that core four. I think, what it would signal is clearly they're going ahead with Matthews as the centerpiece of the team, and that Nylander, I think, is an increasingly important part of the future. And, with the cap going up, there is lots of money now to move things around. You've got, TJ Brody, Ilya Samsonov, Bertuzzi, Domi, all these guys are on expiring deals. And so I think there is a chance to still move money around or to have a different look to the team next season, even with those main pieces still in place.
So my big concern is they're about to pay Nylander for the kind of impact he's majorly, doing this year and putting together. That's 45 goals around there and 116 points. I just wonder, CJ, if that type of production is sustainable, and, to suggest that the number is going to be around 11 and 11.5, we're thinking around there. Do you think how does he end up his side of the bargain? What does he need to do to be justified? I'm worth that money.
He's got to be a primetime player for as many of those 8 years as can be possible. I mean, the only concern I would have, and this is for any player, 8 years is an eternity in pro sports. I mean, all kinds of things can happen, injuries, look at the Jonathan Huberdeau deal. I mean, that's at the extreme end of where a team immediately has buyer's remorse, where he's still got 7 more years on his contract and his play has fallen off precipitously in Calgary. So, there's always risk in long-term contracts. I guess on both ends. At Nylander's age, there's less risk for him because the odds of him outperforming this deal are probably not that high, because you typically don't see players get better in their 30s, although there's some that have. I mean, Joe Pavelski still moldering along, and, he's got some gray in his beard like I do. So, you never say never. William Nylander's incredibly well-conditioned, a very serious athlete. There's no reason to think he can't play well into his late 30s. It's just certainly not a guarantee that, that's going to happen. So, I think he has to be a first-line bona fide star for them for the deal to make sense. But, if you look the way his career's, trended, if anything, his numbers are probably held back a little bit because he didn't play as much. If you look back, 3-4 years ago, he was getting 17 minutes a night while the other top players were getting 20 plus. He's played more this year. The production's up. He's boosted his totals each of the last couple seasons. I mean, someone's gonna pay him a lot of money if it's not Toronto. And I think the Leafs really like the player, and I know he certainly wants to stay and play for the Leafs.
Yeah, he's definitely fun to watch, right? There's this confidence, even on the penalty kill, right? What he can do shorthanded. But touching back on the goalies here, with Samsonov struggles, and obviously Treliving looks like a genius right now with the 1-year deal on him. What is the plan moving forward here? Like Wool obviously has this ankle injury, which concerns me. I dealt with bad ankles, and playing goal is tough. Do they ride Martin Jones, or do they look for someone to fill that gap, or is this just like a wait and see on Samsonov here?
I think it's a giant wait and see. I mean, certainly they're gauging the market to see what's out there, but like a lot of other teams in the same position, I don't think that there's, a slam dunk, acquisition to be made. And the Leafs have to be very protective of what few assets they have to trade, because I do think they want to, move some pieces to solidify the blue line still before March 8th. And, obviously they have to protect themselves when it comes to the cap. I mean, at this point, I think they're almost hoping, praying, doing whatever they can that Samsonov at least rediscovers some degree of form where he can be a player for them. There was a lot to like about Joseph Woll, but, he's still young in his career, hasn't had a ton of experience. And then coming back from that injury, I mean, it all feels a little bit tenuous, doesn't it? I suppose the wisdom of signing a veteran like Martin Jones is at least paying off in the short term here. But, I would think that they probably want someone playing in front of him when it comes to the biggest games of the season and into the playoffs. And so I think it's very much wait and see. We've got 9 weeks from today until the trade deadline. And probably the way things unfold over those 9 weeks will dictate whether they're, actually trading for another goaltender before that deadline or rolling with what they got.
I was going to say you're probably counting on the days till March 8th, but I wanted to mention a guy who deserves a lot of credit. He's really, really stepped up. Simon Benoit. Like, it's sort of funny to ask this question, but do you think his random emergence might change the focus of what they're looking to do on the back end? Like, there's no doubt they're going to add one guy, but maybe they don't add that second guy and they allocate those resources somewhere else. Like, how do they feel about Benoit right now?
Yeah, he's been a real, nice signing for them. Obviously, it was a depth signing at the time. He played over 70 games for Anaheim last year. The Ducks obviously weren't competing for too much other than the Connor Bedard sweepstakes at the time. So, maybe that explains why A, he wasn't qualified by them, and B, he wasn't signed by another team sooner than he was. But, I think that it does give them a little more confidence in the depth. And that's maybe some of the benefits when you go through the injury situations you do is you see other players step up. And, I think that for sure he's someone that they would trust to play on their third pairing into a big game. And so, I definitely think it could change slightly the approach. I still think they're going to make a move there. It's something Brad Treliving's really been talking about since second or third week of the season when he was doing media scrums, is that he wants to address the blue line. And so, I don't think it might have shifted. You're right. Probably what you said is that maybe you're talking about one acquisition rather than two if Benoit continues to play well. And, in the meantime, good for him. He's started the year, not in their NHL plans necessarily, but he's really worked his way into the lineup now.
Is Chris Tanev still the guy that they're zoning in on here?
I don't think it's just Chris Tanev. I mean, certainly no secret that the Leafs, have interest there. Part of the problem is I think Calgary would like to get at least a second-round pick back for him. If you look at the Leafs sheet, that I think the next 3 second-round picks are already spoken for. And so they don't, there's not necessarily an easy match for, that kind of deal. And the truth is there's other players out there. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Philadelphia does. I mean, they've hung in a lot longer, I think, than probably even their management expected, certainly than I expected. And so, they got some defensemen to trade. It's not a year where I think we're going to have real headliners at this trade deadline. I mean, I suppose, Elias Lindholm's a pretty good player, was selected as an all-star last night, and he's likely to be moved. But, there definitely are the kind of pieces I think the Leafs need. There's going to be a number of defensemen moved. And so while Tanev is someone that I think they continue to have interest in, it's not him or bust. I think that there's other options for them depending how the market evolves.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on that a little bit throughout here, just with Keefe coaching, and obviously this Atlantic division has been, powerful for a lot of years here, and it seems like it's a passing of the torch this year, with the Metro division just being a logjam and looking like the top 3 teams in the Atlantic, and no one will get a wild card spot. Do the Leafs try to stretch to get better position, moving into the playoffs, or making a trade, or putting something on notice when, this might be the last chance as these teams start to get better and better in the Metro?
Yeah, I mean, they have to be all in, right? And this is the tricky thing. Brad Treliving's taken over this team in the last year. He is not responsible for the decisions made before him, but the cupboard is getting pretty bare, which is what happens when you've had 6 or 7 years where you're really trying to win. They've dealt away a number of first-round picks in previous seasons, and those second rounders, as I mentioned, they don't have a ton of prospects on the rise, but I still think they have to keep pushing the cards in. Basically by signing Matthews to the 4-year extension, they did that gave them a 5-year window from that moment, because he had 1 year left on his deal this year, and then the 4 more to come, where I think the Leafs have to try to be building to win the cup each of those seasons. So, I do think that they're going to do absolutely everything they can, barring an injury to a big player that could change, things if they have a long-term injured reserve situation. I mean, that the cap is going to continue to be an issue for them. And a lot of teams, basically all the top teams, are capped out at this point in time. But we've seen them make a lot of creative moves in the past. Brandon Pridham, their assistant general managers, a wizard at having them limbo under that cap ceiling. And so I think it's going to be an aggressive deadline period. I don't really know how much is going to be out there. As I said, I don't necessarily see them trading for a frontline forward, but I could see an impactful move on the blue line for sure. And then we'll just have to see where the goaltending ends up here with Samsonov and Wall's injury and all that.
CJ, what about the Ottawa Senators? Like, they're a team that's so polarizing in my world because nobody expects them to be a deadline seller, and they're going to be a deadline seller. They're awful. And a name like Jacob Chychrun just seems to come back to my head. He's a 1.5 years away from UFA. I don't know what this guy's seen in his time in Ottawa suggests, hey, I want to sign there long term. Like, is he a guy that potentially could be out there at some point in time, if not this season, into the off season? Ottawa in general, how do you view them at the deadline?
Well, I don't think the Senators themselves have made that determination, but you're right. I mean, the writing is starting to get on the wall here. Another loss last night for them, and it's just been a disastrous season, really, from start to finish. Firing a GM and coach in season. Having a player suspended 41 games. Losing a first-round draft pick. Again, some of that is from things that happened in the past, but it's all come down here in the last 3-4 months since Michael Landauer bought the team. And I suppose one of the good aspects of that is you got a fresh set of eyes on everything, and you don't have a lot of connection to the things that have gone on. And so I think it is an opportunity to start fresh and to make some bold moves. I mean, that's probably the next place they're going to have to get to, but I just don't think they're quite there at the moment. But yeah, I mean, look, Chychrun would be a natural piece to move, because I do think, while we see a lot of trades involving players on expiring deals, typically the best ones are, if the team's going to give up some assets, if at least they're getting two playoff runs guaranteed out of a player, like Jacob Chychrun if he was moved at this deadline. And so, the Leafs have certainly been interested in the past when Kyle Dubas was the general manager. I don't think this one's quite at the front burner just yet, but stay tuned in Ottawa because, they were hoping for a turnaround when they made the coaching change, and they're still spinning their wheels there.
I love that. Stay tuned for All-Star Weekend as well. Auston Matthews going to All-Star Weekend. You're going to be at All-Star Weekend. All the fun and theatrics that comes with that. Just, can you speak to Matthews, the season he's having? And just, I brought it up earlier. Like, remember last year in Sunrise, it was all about Matthew Tkachuk and Sasha Barkov. I love that Matthews is going to be like the unofficial official host of All-Star Weekend. And I'm sure Bieber is going to be close to him too, right?
I would imagine. I don't have any info on that. I'm not a Bieber insider, but I mean, but given their ties and how close they are, I would think as long as he's not busy doing something else, he'll be there. Yeah, look, Matthews is one of those guys. I mean, for all the talk of the players wanting to get out of the All-Star game, this is going to be the 7th year he's gone. Basically, every year that there's been an All-Star game when he's been in the league, he's been there. He's wanted to be there. He's been into LA and St. Louis and Sunrise, and now I think to have it in Toronto. Like, I think he's really going to embrace it. I mean, the fact that he's one of the 12 players that's going to do the individual skills competition. I mean, there's actually going to be a little pressure there, right? I mean, I guess you have nothing to lose. If you don't win it, you don't win $1 million. If you win it, you win $1 million. But there's going to be more focus. It's not just, hey, you do one event and then you go off into the background. And then the fact he'll captain one of the teams, I think it's going to be a cool weekend for him. I would imagine you're going to see at least William Nylander and maybe another Leaf there, just given the power of Leafs Nation in fan voting and the fact it is being hosted in the city. And I think it'll actually be kind of a cool event. I mean, look, the All-Star game is what it is. I think it's a great time to be together. I always like going to the weekend. I seldom remember what happens in the games or on the ice because it's not really that important. But I do think that bringing the draft back this year, changing up the skills competition, and then having Matthews and likely a few other Leafs, I think it'll end up being one of the more memorable weekends that we've seen from All-Star.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.